Hey guys, Sean here and welcome to the F1 Word. Now, as I'm sure you are well aware, Liam Lawson has had a tough start to life at Red Bull Racing, failing to make it out of Q1 at both of the opening Grand Prix of the season and has failed to score a single point. That has led to a ton of speculation about his future with the team, and as has been expected, they have chosen to take swift action. A statement from Red Bull explained that following a difficult opening period to the season for Liam Lawson, the decision has been made that from the 2025 Japanese Grand Prix, the next race of the season, Yuki Tsunoda will move up to the main Red Bull team, with Lawson heading back to driving for Racing Bulls. So, a swap, or as Red Bull put it, they are in the unique position of having 4 seats on the grid, and as such have made the decision to exercise a driver rotation. Tsunoda, of course, therefore becoming Max Verstappen's latest teammate. Both Lawson and Verstappen have described Red Bull's current F1 car, the RB21, as being challenging to drive, and as such, it's going to require experience and insight to bring the car into a more comfortable operating window. Therefore, a collective decision has been made to place the far more experienced Tsunoda in the main team, with Lawson, of course, returning to Racing Bulls in order to continue growing as a Formula One driver within a more familiar environment. Team boss Christian Horner explained this was a purely sporting decision, having entered the new season with the goal of retaining the driver's title and reclaiming the constructor's crown. He does go on to say that the team acknowledges there is a lot of work to be done with the RB21, and Tsunoda's experience will prove highly beneficial in helping to develop the current car, before going on to add, "We have a duty of care to protect and develop Liam, and together we see that after such a difficult start, it makes sense to act quickly so Liam can gain experience as he continues his F1 career with Racing Bulls, an environment and a team he knows very well." And thus, the experiment that everyone expected to fail has failed. With Sergio Perez departing at the end of last season, it seemed like a no-brainer, didn't it, that Yuki Tsunoda would get that promotion he had long craved. After all, prior to 2025, he had racked up 87 starts for the junior team, scored 91 points, 30 of which coming last season as he finished 12th in the overall standings, and had shown very strong improvement throughout his career and some great speed. It just all made sense. Instead, they made the call to throw Liam Lawson, who had just 11 F1 starts to his name at that point, into an impossible situation. His limited experience aside, he'd have to start the season at a track he'd never driven at, and would need to follow that up by racing at a sprint event no less, at a track he hadn't raced on for many years. All of that while having to bear the burden that comes with being Max Verstappen's teammate, an impossible task on its own, by the way, and having to get to grips with a car that by both drivers' admissions last year was hard to drive and getting harder to drive. To demote him after just 2 races as well is incredibly harsh, and it's hard to see how he ever really stood a real chance. Tsunoda was always the right way to go, and that's not, by the way, one of those hindsight is 2020 things. Most people felt that way when it became clear the team were going to part ways with Perez towards the back end of 2024. But why didn't they go for Tsunoda in the first place? Well, as with everything, in F1 there will be many reasons, including the fact he was a strategic Honda-inspired hire, and so with the Ford era starting in 26, there seemed to be this expectation that Tsunoda would be leaving the Red Bull program along with the power unit manufacturer. Don't forget, a seat at the main team didn't open up until the end of last season, at which point the Ford deal had already been announced. So if the plan was for Tsunoda to be moved on before then, why would you put him in that seat, I suppose? They needed to prepare for the future. Enter Liam Lawson. It was clear that having tied Checo down to a new deal, the plan was to allow Lawson to mature at Racing Bulls for at least 1 full season, but by ditching Perez, they found themselves in a bit of a corner. Daniel Ricciardo was gone, and as already mentioned, Tsunoda was expected to be on his way at the end of 2025. That left them little option but to take Lawson, bearing in mind that the remaining drivers in the junior program were still yet to obtain their super licenses. And in Red Bull's defence, yes, really, Lawson had done well at V-Carb and was showing improvement and that he had potential. So whilst it was a gamble, they did have reason to be optimistic. Unfortunately, the RB21 has not been an easy car to drive, and it is obvious that there is more development required to bring that car up to a standard that will make it a championship contender. With Lawson still honing his craft as a driver, the idea of expecting him to manage both the driver learning curve and the technical development of the RB21 is a lot of pressure for a young driver, especially with the added pressure that comes from fans and the media as well as the team itself. Honestly, I feel for Lawson, I really do. He was thrown into an impossible situation and was given just 2 races to try and adapt. That is ridiculous and nowhere near enough time. And I doubt anyone, if they're being honest and not just trying to be edgy or whatever, would claim that a couple of weekends is enough time. Especially when you consider the conditions in Australia on race day and the lack of practice time drivers get on a sprint weekend. Then again, you might say that other rookies have done a really solid job, so that's no excuse. But the pressure at Red Bull is through the roof, and that car, again, is not easy to drive. So when you take everything into account and the team's need for both cars to start scoring points as soon as possible, maybe it is the best for everyone involved for Lawson to step back into an environment he knows well and into a car that is, by all accounts, easier to drive and get somebody like Tsunoda with a lot more experience into that car to try and help to develop it. There's no denying it's an incredibly harsh decision, but Red Bull clearly felt they needed to step in quickly to avert disaster, and not just in terms of the potential title fight, if there is going to be one, but also to ensure they don't burn through yet another one of their young drivers, because if they keep doing that, there's going to be nobody left at this rate. I'm sure it'll crop up, so I will make the point, should they have kept Sergio Perez for 2025? After all, he may have been struggling, but at least he was scoring points, right? Well, look, if you are a long-time viewer of the channel, you'll know that I fought Checo's corner a lot over the last couple of years. So much so that some of you who watch the race reaction streams are really starting to get annoyed at me for, as you'd put it, making excuses for him. And maybe you were right. But it was clear that he was struggling with that car, and if a driver of Perez's speed, skill, and experience was struggling, what chance did anyone else have? However, let's not start forgetting what happened last year. As 2024 rolled on and the latest disappointing result was followed by the latest disastrous weekend, it became apparent, pretty much obvious, that no matter what he tried, he wasn't going to be able to turn it around. And so in my opinion at the time, Red Bull essentially had nothing to lose apart from obviously his sponsorship money. And I'm not going to go back on that now. The thing is, though, and to make the point again, it should have been Tsunoda, and Lawson should not have been thrown into that impossible position. But if they were so sure about putting him in that position, they should have stood by him for at least one more weekend, if not more. After all, he knows Suzuka incredibly well, and that weekend could have changed things for him. We'll never know now. I will add this before I go as well. I really, really hope this doesn't dent Tsunoda's CV or his confidence at all. I worry that it will, but as touched on earlier, he has shown huge improvements since his first season, and he has had, in qualifying at least, a really strong start to 2025. All of that put together has meant that he's being linked with us seats for next year, so I just hope that that all gets remembered if things don't work out and he becomes the latest in an ever-growing line of second Red Bull drivers who have ultimately failed. Whilst, as I've just admitted, I am a bit worried for Yuki, I am relieved for Lawson that whilst this will hurt, he can step away from that pressure cooker and try to find form and grow away from the spotlight. And you know, I don't want to get into it too much in this video because I hope he is the one that really nails this and manages to solve that big second driver problem. But if Tsunoda does struggle just as much as everyone else seems to have, what do Red Bull do then? Apart from trying to tie Max Verstappen down to a lifetime contract, because if he leaves, oh boy, are they in trouble. But that is a conversation for another day. That is it for this news, reaction, analysis, waffle. But let me know down in the comments what you make of this decision by Red Bull. Harsh but correct, completely ridiculous, or perhaps you fall somewhere in the middle. Let me know down below. And for the latest news, reaction, and analysis from the world of Formula One, head on over to planetf1.com. But as ever, thank you for watching. I've been Sean, this has been the F1 Word, and until next time, goodbye.